Welcome back to the channel, people. Slickmason here. Just wanted to discuss another topic that came up in my mind here, and it's some kind of discussion that we could have, especially for immigrants who have lived in Canada for a while, or those people who have just arrived in Canada. I think this is something you need to know about, or at least have in the back of your mind while you're living here and making a decision whether you want to live here for the rest of your life, or if you're just here to pretty much get the citizenship and then go back home. I've actually revealed the topic right there, which is why immigrants leave Canada after getting citizenship. Right. So let's get into it. The first thing is the Canadian experience catch 22. Right. So what does that mean? Well, when we're pitched this idea of Canada, we're told, hey, you're a professional, you have experience, right? We want you to come here, get a job, join the workforce, and pretty much offer us what your skills can offer, right? And what happens is when the immigrants get here, especially what happened to my parents, is that they got here and they were told, hey, your credentials, they don't match up to what we have here because you don't have Canadian experience. Now, the whole Canadian experience thing is probably a bunch of BS as far as I'm concerned, because I don't see how a human being who's treated, if a Canadian is treated in Uganda, for example, by a doctor, right, will they get a different, will the doctor be using way different practices and way different medicine than they would use if they came here to Canada? Maybe I'm wrong, but to me, it doesn't make any sense because when I go for treatment here, right, a doctor will pretty much recommend the same drugs that the doctor in Uganda has recommended to me. And I've been traveling back and forth, so I've seen the two differences of what's going on. And even when doctors do tests and they're monitoring your blood pressure and everything, like they found the same stuff. So I don't know what it is that they're doing that for. Maybe it's to protect Canadian citizens' jobs, which does make sense in my opinion. But at the same time, why don't you just tell us straight up, hey, you know what? You'll need to gain some experience in a Canadian setting as far as the culture and how people handle themselves, right? And then once you fit into that culture, then we can look at getting you a position in a professional field, right? Which would make more sense if they set the expectation. But of course, they probably just want to bring people in droves and then have them figure things out by themselves. So that's one thing I wanted to bring up as the first point. The second point is that there's an unforgiving cost of living, right, and housing. So back home in Uganda, housing is cheaper. A lot of standard of living is also cheaper. If you even look it up, you'll find that it costs way less for a person to survive in Uganda. The only difference is that in Uganda, there's not a lot of opportunities to make the kind of money that you would make here, right? So you come here, you're making more money. However, your standard of living is way lower than it would be if you were making this kind of money back home, right? So that's another thing that they don't. Maybe they people that may warn you about that, but the goal for most, or at least for the immigrants I know, is that they come here, they work like crazy, save a bunch of money, then head back home to buy a piece of land or buy a house or get their lives going there. And then when they've accumulated enough assets back home, they pretty much head out, right? So that's what has always kind of been the plan for most people, is what I've found as far as my experience is concerned. But of course, I want you guys to chime in and let me know if maybe I'm perceiving things wrong, but this is the reality of the situation. Point number 3 is that there's stagnant wages versus global competitors. Now, I'll pretty much give you a perspective here. So I have a relative of mine who went into nursing. She pretty much got a great job here in Thunder Bay, working at the health unit, right? And then she was making good money, right? It was still better money than she'd made before, but then found herself in a situation where she was getting poached by a company in the U.S. that was paying her probably twice or three times the amount that she was getting here, right? And then she decided to take that job in the U.S. right? Try to go through the process of getting the proper documentation in order to go ahead and work in the U.S., right? So most of the people who come here as professionals, once they get that experience and they get those jobs and they become the doctors or the nurses or the engineers, the minute they get that and then other companies in the US are poaching them and paying them more money, right? They're gone. Why wouldn't I leave if there's a better situation over there? The other thing is that the companies in the US could probably pay for your housing as well. So you have one huge expense that you don't have to deal with. And you're working for a more reputable company that's more global and more known, right? And then from that experience, you're able to gain even more money, right? So it makes sense to make that move for an immigrant, especially who hasn't been making that much money most of their lives. And then once they get a taste of it and somebody's offering you better opportunities, I can't blame them for making that move. So that's another thing. Then you have to look at the passport as an insurance policy, right? As a strategy. So Ugandan or East African passports are not really powerful passports, right? So when we come here, we're looking for an opportunity to get access to more countries, right? So we can figure out where the opportunities are. Now, my parents were pretty smart in going like, you know what, let's get here, right? Let's try to fight for this so our kids can have the opportunity to move all over the globe and not be restricted by all these visa restrictions and all that. And it's worked out great for us, right? So most of my family, we got here once we got our citizenship. People started going to explore the world, right? Going to the EU, going to different parts of the world in order to see if life there was better than what was going on here. And some of them have actually gone ahead and established lives over there, right? And I don't blame them because Canada's pretty cold, right? It does get pretty cold. That's something I'll get into later on, but that's another situation that pretty much leads to people wanting to leave once they get their citizenship, because you get access to more countries. Why not take advantage of it, right? So that's another thing. The other thing is a severe lack of healthcare access. Now, Canadian healthcare system is free. Fine, that's the popular perspective. However, access to it is another story, right? I'll give you something from my personal experience. I waited about, since 2019 when I got here to Thunder Bay, I've waited until 2026 to get access to a doctor, right? I've always been getting sent letters, hey, we're still looking for a doctor for you. We're still looking for a doctor. We're still looking for a family doctor. And they finally got one for me in 2026. I mean, I could have just fallen down and died during that time, but I don't go for medical checkups or anything, right? So it's possible that I would have just had some serious health complications. Now, after getting the family doctor, right, he diagnoses me with high blood, or at least he says that there's signs of high blood pressure, right, which could have pretty much, had me dead for a while if I didn't, try to keep it down with being healthy and exercising and stuff. So he caught that. Actually, the interesting thing is that the Ugandan doctor I went to in Uganda actually caught that too, right? Which ties into my previous point. But going back to this whole healthcare access thing, this doctor that they just got me told me that he is not going to be able to have me as a patient because he's looking to stop doing his practice in a year, right? Because he himself got diagnosed with cancer, not high blood pressure, but cancer, right? So he has to pretty much drop me as a patient. Now I have to look for. I mean, I feel sorry for the guy, right, and his family, but I just got a doctor after 6 years of waiting, and then now I'm gonna have to look for a new one within a year, which is probably gonna take me another 6 years. I don't know. It's indefinite, right? But this is the way the healthcare system works here, and it's not the best, right? Free does not necessarily mean the best healthcare that you could possibly get. Now, the medications and all the treatments and stuff over here, more expensive than they would cost in Uganda, obviously, because people earn less money over there. However, it's more accessible, right? You also have places like China where you could get checkups, or you could get any kind of operation you want done in a way shorter time, and you don't have to wait months like you have to over here. Do some research on it, by the way. You might think that I'm just saying things out of nowhere, or just pulling them out of my hoo-ha, but at the end of the day, you kind of do the research yourself and find out if these things are true or not, right? I'm just a guy who turned on the camera and talked here, but it's better if you always do your own research and see if these things are true, because I know there's a lot of people on YouTube here that just get on the camera and talk, and you do some googling and it's like, oh, yeah, this guy's not that's not true. He's being disingenuous, right? So I'm not gonna tell you something just because it's something that I just read somewhere, or and I didn't experience it myself. I like experiencing things myself first, and then I talk about my experiences with it, right? And then pretty much let you guys know where I went for that information, where I did my research before I went ahead and had an experience. And then once I have the experience, I pretty much tell you guys what it is based on what I went through. And that's how I think the world should be. Why should we all try to, get one over each other on every situation? Anyways, I'm sidetracking here, but moving on to the next point: high marginal tax rates. That also ties back into what my sister, my family member, was my sister, obviously, going through, right? What she was going through is the whole situation where you get taxed a lot more when you get into a higher tax bracket. Now, we get taxed a lot, but what we get in return for those taxes is not the best return, right? So when she had to go to the US, less taxes. They don't, in fact, they don't even put taxes on clothes, right? Because she was working in Minneapolis as a nurse, so they didn't have tax on clothes. The housing was pretty good, right? And then, in addition to that, like you're making a lot more money. I'm going across the border. I don't care, because at the end of the day, I want to give my family and and the next generation the best opportunity to be able to get ahead, without having to struggle so much, right? So these are the things that we think about when we come here as immigrants. Anyways, the next thing is geographic and climate realities, right? So that goes back to the cold weather. I mean, you can't really escape something like that in Canada. It's just what it is, right? But at the end of the day, if you could spend your time somewhere else where it's warm for the months when it's cold here and snowing, and it just looks depressing outside. When you come from a tropical country and then you come here and you experience this, at first it's fun because you're like, oh, for the snow is fun, I like it, it's a nice change. But then at the end of the day, it is not, it gets depressing real quick, right? So that's why a lot of people end up, the minute they get the opportunity, they're out because they just know, hey, like the reality is that this climate is not, it's not the best for the lifestyle that we're used to, right? And hey, if some people may like the cold and they're like, no, I'm willing to stay here, that's fine. But for me personally, I don't like the cold that much. Also, talking about geographic realities, actually this might be a point that's connected to this, because it is cheaper to travel in Canada than it is to travel outside of Canada, right? So a ticket from here to Vancouver costs more than a ticket for me to go from here sometimes to, let's say, Iceland. Iceland of all places. Why is it cheaper to go to Iceland than it is to travel to Vancouver? And we're within the same country. These are local airlines. And I never understood that. I mean, I'll probably have to do some research on it and understand what justification they have for that here. But, back home in Uganda, I mean, we're in East Africa there, right? It's not as big, I understand, bigger landmass, whatever, but you're within the same country. But in Uganda, you have the East African bloc there. You could go from Uganda to Kenya for the same price, actually less money than you'd pay if you were going from Thunder Bay to Toronto. You'd spend less money. which is crazy. It's crazy to me, but hey, this is the reality of what it is to live in Canada. Um, Once you come here as an immigrant, and then you start to compare things. Right now, there's people who've been born here their whole lives, and they don't have the chance or maybe they don't have that perspective because maybe they haven't traveled outside the country that much, or maybe they've just stayed on the North American block and just traveled within this area, and they've never even gone overseas across the pond, right? Now, those kinds of people, they're the ones that I want to also give this perspective, so they understand. Hey, there's other things out there. You don't necessarily need to stay here all the time and conform to whatever it is that they're telling you, right? Freedom of mobility. That's what how I like to live my life, and I think I'm giving you guys value in this video so you'd kind of know where the perspective that I have comes from, and even this immigrant perspective that I've had in my life is what is reflected in my music if you listen to it, right? So, yeah. Anyway, I'll stop ranting, talking you guys' ears off, but that's what I just wanted to talk about today. And if you like the content and you found value in it, please leave a like, subscribe. Let me know what any topics I should discuss next. Maybe you guys want to know something else about an immigrant perspective, how the lifestyle is, anything about music, anything about politics. Just let me know. Throw it down in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great day.